and welcome everyone back to the third parallel sessions that are going on for the day 2 of the IPPN 2021 conference. I'm sure you are enjoying yourself, at the auditorium, learning, listening, and getting to know the research that people from across the globe have been, being involved with in terms of technology and policy as the broad theme. So right now at these parallel sessions, we have the continuing roundtable on water and climate change going on in presentation session 2. In the presentation hall 1, we have curated papers chaired by Professor Charu Malhotra, the head of e-governance and ICT at the Indian Institute of Public Administration. And here at the auditorium, we welcome you to witness a very interesting panel discussion. The topic is analyzing the challenges of interaction between technology and society in the COVID era. The moderator for the panel is Arindam Banerjee, partner PDAG. And we have with us the panelists, Aniket Dogar, founder and CEO of Hak Darshak Empowerment Solutions, Johnson, Regional Head of Programs at FIA Foundation, Rushil, Founder and President, Bandhu Urban Tech, and Professor Vibhuti Patel, Professor at the Tata Institute of Social Sciences. So welcome, Arindam, and over to you for the panel discussion.
Thanks, Arushi, and warm welcome to all my co-panelists and speakers. And I think there is no better time to actually probably take stock of, how technology has either played a very enabling or a disabling role in the context of COVID, considering that we are actually at the cusp of a year since the entire crisis that hit every one of us across the strata of the society, and particularly those at the bottom of the pyramid. So today I do have, we have practitioners. We have someone in Professor Patel, who has been a long-term academic. We have Johnson Topno, who also, belongs to the civil society sphere, and Aniket and Rushil, both in terms of practitioners trying to leverage the effective use of technology to bridge the gaps that are there in the society. So largely the way in which we would be proceeding is that I would like to hear from all four of you a couple of pointers on each leading question that I have at the interface of technology and society. And it would be great, for all of us to hear insights from all of you based on the work done in the last 1 year, whether it is in terms of Johnson's work or whether it is, Aniket, the entire gamut of welfare schemes that you have managed to put on a platform, probably the only enterprise in the country who has that kind of spread right now, or whether it's Rushil who at Bandhu kind of simulating an entire platform which is AI based, trying to bridge the gap that's between workers to reach gainful employment, or whether Professor Patel with the large scale understanding of the gender inequalities on which you have often spoke. So if I may start with, Johnson, you have been heading, the migrant worker control room for the government of Jharkhand and the Labour Department. And, it has played a very significant role in terms of how a state government mitigated the entire migrant worker crisis. However, I'm considering that, the topic that we have, you have seen how databases have been created. Sometimes, there have been issues in terms of reaching out to people in the absence of good data, connecting data numbers. And recently Niti Aayog and a lot of other government panels have been significantly stressing the need to have what they are calling, as a national data hub of migrant workers or a state level data hubs. So as someone who kind of handled the entire thing for the past 1 year, where do you see the challenges are, number one, and how have you faced or how have you seen at the interface of how technology is kind of, negotiating with a lot of inequalities that are there around, especially in the context of workers and other members at the bottom of the pyramid in the society?
Yeah. So thank you, Arindam. I'll have a few slides to present. So I'll just share my screen and then
Definitely.
I'll try to be very brief on that. Just a minute.
Yeah.
Hope I'm able to, you are able to
It's
see
visible.
my screen.
It's visible. Yeah, it's visible.
Yeah. So thank you so much, IEPN, for organizing such a great global interaction on various issues and challenges in today's development context.
Johnson, you can go on a full screen mode on the presentation. Yeah,
Okay.
that's useful.
Yeah. Is it now visible?
Yeah, yeah. Everyone, I think it's visible to everyone. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Arindam. And today, today is the memorable day for state of Jharkhand, and it's a 1 year anniversary, I would say, and for me as well, when we launched state control room for migrant laborers, and today is the day for that. And the first day we had 6,000 calls in a single day. I'll come very briefly. I represent an organization called FIA Foundation, which works on multiple issues like strengthening local governance, rights and entitlements, natural resource management, work on migrants. And we basically associate among ourselves with the socially excluded communities across these many states and almost over 80,000 villages. This is the context of Jharkhand. The Jharkhand happens to be one of the very rich mineral and natural resources, but we are still grappling with extreme poverty. 50% districts are poverty below, greater than 40%. And especially if you look at the migrants, it's the scheduled tribes, scheduled caste, and unorganized sectors, people who really migrate out of Jharkhand for their better livelihoods and aspirations. A lot of issues with respect to basic services, which we are really working on. You have issue of agriculture, issue of migration, issues of human trafficking and employability. These are some of the issues that we are really working on. And while looking at the COVID response that we are talking about, this has been one of the, I would say that 2020 has been a year of fear, anguish, uncertainty, and unprecedented crisis that we all faced, wherein FIA Foundation took this in partnership with the state government, especially the Department of Labor, working very closely with Arindam and Chief Minister Office. And our Honorable Chief Minister has been very, very kind in terms of really talking about the dignity of life, who have migrated, and how do we bring it back. And that's where this concept of central control room was set up with all civil society volunteers and the people from the department who were there together with us. So a lot of, I'll come in the second slide, a lot of support with respect to humanitarian response in terms of relief works, in terms of medical equipments. And also we engage large civil society organization across India. And we found that around 620 districts in India where people from Jharkhand were stranded. And we partner with civil society in terms of reaching out to the communities who were stranded through medical care, counseling, support in travels and so on. So this is one of the tools that was developed very initially, because during the lockdown and new government was just setting in, and that's where this COVID response, COVID era started it up, and then we had to really work around the clock. And then when you have a new government and then the department have to really respond well, one of the very good thing that under the leadership of the Honorable Chief Minister happened, that the senior leaderships from the different departments were appointed as nodal officers to coordinate with counterpart states. And then we had to really engage. The first day we had 6,500 call running up 10 telephone lines, and second day we had to really expand it to 50 telephone lines open to the country. And that's where we had to really, initially we started doing it manually, and now we had to think about streamlining, and I had to reach up to IITB Bangalore to really help that support. And as a friendly, they volunteered to support us in getting these systems and portals to be developed, where we really every day getting the calls from different parts of the country, and then analyze it, monitor it, track it, and then deliver these data to the concerned nodal officers and engage with the counterparts states to really reach out. This is how the structure in which we worked on. So basically this particular migrant help desk, it is again a cloud-based open source systems that we developed within 2 to 3 days. And then we had to really look at many supports in terms of reaching out, really locating the people, the place where they were stranded. And that when you call it back to the people, there is a kind of feeling that yes, government is there before us, to hear their agony, and also try to respond them quickly. And you will be happy to know that because of the large civil society engagement that we were able to reach them within half an hour wherever they were there in the country, and a lot of support on the ground. This is another tools that was developed, because other states were trying to have these kind of systems. We also developed with the support from the ITB Bangalore, wherein trying to have this again open source to get them registered. And every day we used to have huge numbers calls coming up. Almost in the last 1 year, we have received more than 8 lakhs calls, which has a database now. We have a database, we can reach out to the community where they were stranded, what is the history, source and destination mapping, and everything is there. And because of this type of registration, another tool that we were able to locate people and arrange all the first train, if you hear in India, was from Jharkhand, to bring people from Jharkhand, from Hyderabad. The first flight to bring the communities who were stranded in Leh Ladakh, again from Jharkhand. And this was supported by State Control Room with the support from Chief Minister Office. These are some of the photographs, which still we are working. The control room is still up and running. And these are some of the photographs you see, the story of border road organizations. The people from 1970s, people are going, and we did not have any know about it. We were able to bring them. We were able to really see the human stories, the struggle, the exploitation, and many things that has happened to these people, and we brought them with that dignity. And if you look at the functions that we had, the stage 1, receive calls, stage 2, record the details, and this is the flow that we had. So from receiving to the solution, how do you reach out to? So this was completely in the open source cloud-based system that was developed. This is the another, this is how the team was managing it online and offline both, where we were documenting the data that we had, entering call details with all the details, so that we have this the data which is the source and destination. So every numbers were codified, and we have in the history, we have the history of the calls, follow-up actions. So the data that we were collecting from the control room used to be shared with the nodal officers to the counter state. The same data was given to the civil society organizations, so that they are there any parts of the country instantly. Within half an hour to 40 minutes, we were up there for food, shelter, counseling, and whatever atrocities that were happening. And this is the dashboard that we had. And this is the kind of state and district level data that we were analyzing every day. Every day by 6 to 7, we were sharing the bulletin to the state government, to the leadership. This is how the data is showing, and what is the action thereafter. If you look at the panic, the calls, the registrations, which was developed, and we were also developing the heat maps, how it is looking at the source and destination, the major clusters of migrants where our people are stuck, and how do we reach them up. So these kind of analyses were happening every day. And the other major thing that we did, because during the lockdown when people were stuck, what is that we are able to support them, because people are suddenly closed because of this pandemic situations, in terms of the need. Suddenly shops are closed, cities are closed, cities have disowned these communities, and so we had to really reach them up. And while looking
you have another 2 minutes, if you can just hurry up, and then also probably give your response in terms of based on the experience of doing such a huge kind of an endeavor, what has been the challenges that you feel in terms of leveraging technology?
Yes, sir. Now I'm coming to that. Yes. So that was one of the data, when we were looking at the registration, the government did not have the data of the large people that were migrated out in outbound migrations. The government did not have the data that we had of around 8,50,000 people who comes under building and construction workers. But we found that 95% of the people were within the state. And you know, the only 5 to 10% people who were registered and they were in the different parts of the country. It was very difficult to really provide them cash transfers. And we had to really deal with, and if you look at this data, I mean, mobile application was developed, but the fear was still there that I don't know whether better of people access more, or you know, the more the vulnerable might have been left in the process. But we did facilitate the process where at least a person who was able to get 1,000 rupees bucks to really have some relief. So that was one of the challenges. The registration is extremely important. If you really have to work this kind of pandemic situations, you are able to really locate them with all their database, the account details, so that you are able to reach them up. So that was one of the struggle, and we have been able to communicate to the government that we have to do that registration compulsorily, so that we have to have both source and destination data is with us, and we are able to reach them for any pandemic, any crisis that happens in future. Secondly, the penetration of a smartphone is also a questionable. You know, when you are talking about the most vulnerable and marginal communities working in a very unorganized sectors, they may not have access to smartphones. They work for a very meager. So that is also one of the, we have to develop some other mechanisms. And so social media has been very active. Social media has been very active, and their usage, because of that, we are able to reach them up in a large number. The other thing is that the digital platforms which does not discriminate people. So more of a systems have to be developed within the government, or some kind of large collaboration with the interstate collaboration with the government system is required, needs to be systematized. Civil societies work in very, very isolations, and in such kind of pandemic situation, government and civil society have to come together. You might be very close to the community, but government does not support you. So one of the learning that we had, we were able to do that from the state government, and the trust that leadership had on us is that let us work together. So the private sector, the civil society, the media, everybody joined together in a war footing basis and talking the same language. And I feel proud to say that Jharkhand was one of the states which where the migrant workers issues were addressed really well, and is still that saga is happening. So the next, just these are some of the areas that we need to really work on. Skill mapping is another thing that we need to have. Safe migration policies, which we are engaging with Niti Aayog, an information hub that we are talking about, it has to be largely shared with a larger community. So data is not one domain. It's everybody should have access to those data formats. With definitely the data security is another issue that we have, but promote the safe migration. There are migration which are distressed. There are migration which are aspirational, but you know, people are our own people, our citizens. We have to protect their human rights values. So I end up here, and thank you so much. These are some of the heat maps that we had. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Johnson, for like a very broad overview of the entire backend, infrastructure, the processes, and also some of the observations. And drawing from one of your observations in terms of, the lack of a single, or I would say concerted digital platform whereby workers or the bottom BOP population in the country can get access to welfare schemes or even awareness about it. I would like to kind of draw in Aniket here, and some of the observations which Johnson kind of shared from the experience. You and Haq Dakshak have been working in terms of getting access of the rural population or the marginal population to welfare schemes through a single platform. I mean, drawing upon that experience of last mile delivery and the role that technology can play, if you could share some of the insights from your experience, and also how do you see this playing out in a larger way? Again, these are very isolated endeavors that we all are probably doing. But in what way do you think, a public-centric kind of approach be taken up?
Thanks, Arindam. I think at Akdarshak, I'll briefly first share that, we are working on ensuring people, and we started off actually with the work that people get access to all kind of information on government schemes. Government welfare programs, firstly, are very, very political. Government schemes are supposed to be designed to get more votes. there is I mean, of course, to get the social upliftment but it is very, very political. So there is a constant change in the design, the benefits, the eligibility criteria. And the eligibility criteria of government schemes, very simply put, it works like a probability theorem. If and or conditions. If you belong to this caste or to this income or to this domicile and to this geography, you will get a scheme. So if you break down these simple concepts, you will get a questionnaire, which basically once you answer it in our platform, you will know what you are eligible for. And at the back end, we have spent the last 5 years in building research teams across the country. And there are about 500 different kind of unique government programs in the country. But once we started digitizing government schemes, today we have 7,600 government schemes, which include not only for citizens, but for gram panchayats. We are also now opened up the system for MSMEs and micro enterprises. And the reason for that large number is that each state has different rules. To give a quick example, a Jat community in UP will have OBC, Haryana doesn't. So the whole eligibility criteria changes for the same kind of caste, right? So those are unique changes that are needed. I think one of our observations, and I'll come step by step, technology, government schemes, and then the execution. In terms of technology, I think there has been some great work happening. I think government has, in a way, COVID has been a boon in terms of government opening up and realizing more federal coordination. So one nation, one ration card, for example, is a classic example of how governments now are working towards identifying this critical problem of ration cards. And I think all of us saw that, basic food lying in food distribution systems, but because of lack of coordination between different systems, we were not able to get our own citizens in the country access to ration. So that was a huge issue. And that kind of interoperability of systems is a great example. Again, like I said, we have the technology. I think while we are sending, now we are planning to send people to Mars, it's unbelievable and unimaginable to think we can't think of government systems to get the welfare delivery. Problem is the political will, right? Again, giving examples like, till date, you do not have Ayushman Bharat in West Bengal, right? Because the center and state federal issues. You just got Ayushman Bharat launched in Punjab last year. Till that time, there was no scheme. So I think interoperability of government schemes, identity documents is a critical federal issue. Technology wise, we are there. So I would not delve into a lot of technology issues. We have AI, we have algorithms, we have machine learning tools. We can use a complicated backend system like a WhatsApp and Facebook and make it so easy to use for all of us. So I think there is no debate that the technology exists, can be used, but there is need for more political will. In terms of, I think the larger issue here in terms of codifying these schemes, government welfare programs is more important, because we have in the country, I feel, too many government schemes. I think a more concentrated 50 to 100 government program agenda is something that is more needed. But again, I don't see that happening. I mean, our constant elections are a clear example. Every election manifesto, if you see, there are more schemes announced and the older schemes still exist. So I think local language content and the simple codifying of government programs is important. All our content is in 15 different local languages, and that is something that has really helped in disseminating of the information. And I think the part on execution is where I would say is the most critical. And that's been our observation during the last year. We were able to support 100,000 families during COVID. Overall, we have reached 1 million families in the last 3 years itself across 22 states. And the critical piece to understand is that technology is not the end solution. Technology is a means to the end. And we have to build, for the kind of population we are catering, more assisted tech models. So in our model, for example, we train self-help group women in rural areas as Hagdarshikas, as entrepreneurs, who then go out in the community and screen people. You can build the most sophisticated tools, whether it's using AI, using algorithms, helplines, chatbots, everything is available. But how will you make a migrant worker or a rural citizen or a Gram Panchayat member actually use it? Most of the women that, for example, we are working in Chhattisgarh, we are doing a large program there, do not even have access to the smartphone, because they get the worst smartphone in the family. The best smartphones go to their husbands and brothers and fathers and not to them. So how do you ensure that, for example, a program during COVID, which resulted in, which was supposed to give 1,500 rupees to women under the government program, in Atmanirbhar program, it never reached them. their Jandan accounts were not accessible, their payments channels were not, they couldn't withdraw cash. So I think some of these challenges in execution are very important to note. And I think most of our learnings are around that technology is there. It's easy to use. We should look at very simple tools. I mean, a simple helpline IVR is also technology. A simple local language poster is also technology. Because for us, what is very complicated or a very sophisticated tech can be a very simple to use UX UI generated visual for someone who's a first generation user. So I think we need to broaden the horizon as our main learning of technology, use a lot of local language tools. And I think at the end execution, train as many community people as possible who become the champions, so that it is a very decentralized process, and that's where we can get more ground up community involved. I think in our work, one of our success reasons for our success so far in terms of getting execution in terms of government programs is that self-help group members are our Hagdarshikas. So it becomes a very ground up model of Gram Panchayats processing applications, documents, identity documents. The last piece that I just wanted to quickly touch upon is on two parts that I think need our critical view in terms of, or work on in terms of the learning from the pandemic. One is on simplifying identity documents. Majority of our people are left out for government schemes because of identity documents, and majorly in the urban migrants, construction workers, domestic workers, factory workers, because identity is a big issue. If I am coming from Uttar Pradesh, coming to even Bombay to work, I will not get access to government programs in Bombay because I'm not a political voter there. My voter ID, my ration card, my caste certificate, everything is from UP. So that simplifying Aadhaar was in a way supposed to do that, but that has not resulted in the same kind of outcome. But we need to simplify identity documents in the country and identify people more on the needs of economic needs. Caste is very important. Income is very important. All those criteria there, but we need to simplify that. The second big thing that I feel is around social security. I think we need a lot of work on social security, and that really needs work on I think a lot of government work is already happening on the gig economy social security work, but we need an urban guarantee employment program. I think some work has been happening there. I think Narega was a lifesaver in the country. Rural demand, because of rural demand, we were able to survive, and that's an acknowledgement that all of us as citizens should have. We would have had a -30, -35 kind of an economy had Narega not pumped in money and our rural economy not thrived. And I think there are lessons there to create very simple systems of an urban employment guarantee program in a country a size of ours, where we are literally having 100 million people migrate every 3 years to permanently to urban cities. We need an urban minimum guarantee program, wage program. And I think that's our second that's one of our big learnings apart from identity documents. Yeah. Thank you.
Fantastic, Aniket. I think very crisp and in a very nuanced way, you kind of gave an overview in terms of drawing in from experiences of Hagdarshik itself, and just taking cue from some of the recurring things that I felt is the whole way. And I'll come to Professor Patel for your comments now. There is an existing framework of digital inequalities, if I may say so. I mean, no matter how we might say, the internet has reached every corner, and as Aniket gave an example, that even the fact that a woman, or most probably, a tribal woman in Chhattisgarh or in a Jharkhand, even if you have an access to a phone, probably it's the worst kind of a phone that probably is already half dead that you are getting. And now drawing in from that within this entire framework of societal inequalities, recently I was reading this report yesterday in Indian Express. I think that the female labor force participation has gone further down in the last 1.5 years or so, obviously with the pandemic being around.
Yeah.
And you gave the example of Jan Dhan and how things didn't reach there. So Professor Patel, drawing in from both Johnson and Aniket's, and obviously after that I'll also move to Rushil. What in your kind of overall experience as well as deep understanding, where do you kind of situate this entire gendered inequality within the larger framework of digital inequalities that we are seeing, and how do you feel that practitioners like Aniket or Rushil, or even us for that matter, take this up with governments at a scale, or for example even an institute like ISB, where we are having this conference on policy and technology and society. So it would be good to also hear your observations.
Yeah, I think this whole multiple intersectional marginalities that women, especially from the working class, and especially only 6% of the women are in the organized sector, who also had a major burden because they were working from home, multitasking, doing elderly care, child care, self-care, and care of the ill people in the family, along with the office, the demand of their office. So that was there. But 94% of the women who are in the organized sector, their vulnerabilities were very high, like domestic workers who were given mobile by their own employers. In Bombay, it is the employer who give mobile to their domestic workers because they are at the back end call of their service. Those who had worked for 16 years, 18 years, 20 years, their landlords, their employers did not even pick up phone. They were not even paid wages for the month of March, for which they had worked for 25 days. When they went to the gated community, watchmen threw them out. So, and Seva study by Indian Social Studies Trust is also showing that really everywhere the scenario was the same. 85% of women have not been paid their wages. And after that, they were the ones who were earlier cooking for their employers. They were standing in the queue. Like women's groups combined together in Bombay. Luckily for us, we had a very strong legacy of women working together right from 1972. All women's groups, irrespective of their political moodings, when it comes to women's question, they come together. So they were the ones who who were running the community organizations along with the community-based organizations or shelter camp or working in the COVID center or containment zone. And the kind of horror stories we heard from these women, and as you said, currently 1 crore girls are out of school. Why? Because they don't have digital connectivity. When the lockdown was declared, 8% of Indian children had internet-based support system. And all these children who were forced out of school, we can't call them dropped out, they were also inducted into forced child labor and also forced marriages. And these marriages have, in last 1 year, Women's Ministry of Women and Child Development's helpline 181 and 1098 received more than 4,25,000 distress calls, out of which 25% calls were from the girls below the age of 18. Complaints of child trafficking, complaints of child marriage, complaints of forced labor, and all these things. I think they were. It served both ways, because had there not been digital technology, these kids would not have been able to this, because now in all schools everybody knows there is 181 police helpline is there. So that was in a way that, but the government could intervene only in cases of 12,000 cases. So you can see the enormity of the problem. And because our criminal justice system was totally geared to corona. Second very important thing that happened was the reproductive health needs of women, because sanitary pads were not included in a essential service, or the maternity care was not included in the. So it was only this technology, wherever they had access to technology, either the neighbors or people who saw them in pain, they contacted the voluntary organizations or the doctor, because private clinics and nursing homes were they were completely closed, and public hospitals, and they were overcrowded. So people to people solidarity could happen. It was facilitated by the technology, because people were using WhatsApp, they were putting up their distress. In fact, even the cases of domestic violence and the different behavior of the husband, the women, the poignant narrative that you see even in Facebook account, generally these are not the matters women would say, because they would either confide to their neighbors, or they would confide to the police, because we have police help. But because nothing was available, they express themselves on social media. So that is one. And we also started, the women's groups were the first, like just in the last week of March only, they started the common poster. And that we also started online training program. I would like to share the PPT. It will not take more, because there are images only mostly. So can I share? Yeah.
Yeah. Please share, Dr.
So this is the ongoing online training program we did for all those who volunteered, who gave their name on Facebook or Instagram or WhatsApp. They wanted to do something for the community. Then we started online training program, and there were 3 components into it: health, how to address the health emergency, and what are the support system available in the community. And second one was the violence against women, and third one was any kind of police atrocities. No, so this is the one we used for this thing, that how the social isolation was creating a situation where gender-based violence became a shadow pandemic, as UN had declared. And then the data from the government of India only, that how between 2 to 10 times violence against women has increased. Boys locker room, the moment the news for boys locker room came, so many community organizations and individuals, they came and told us it is not one such locker room. There are hundreds of them thriving. Pornography is thriving under this thing. And that's why National Commission for Women and State Commission for Women were asked to do intensive online training via colleges and schools about the safety, cyber safety. Then the question of helpline. So many women's organizations, they gave their mobile number, which can be contacted 24/7. And we connected these mobile numbers with the police. And that's why this kind of posters were also circulated extensively on social media, and also wherever possible, newspapers. Because newspapers were also, those days were allowed, PDF were sent on WhatsApp. Then the protective, how to, in case of domestic violence, which was the most, like even if you see NFHS 5 data of 2019-20, which shows massive escalation of domestic violence, and especially adolescent girls, violence against adolescent girls who had earlier at least 3, 4, 5 or 6 hours of freedom of going to school. They were also caged in the house, and everyone became the guardian of their morality, checking their mobile and everything. And at one level, they did not want to give mobile to girls, but because of online education, you had to give. So that was the dilemma middle class has. So that the how to cope up, what should be our response to violence. And this poster, all women's organizations throughout the country, they came, they exchanged this thing on, and the common poster was circulated very nationally. Organizations like TISS, IIT Mumbai, IIT Bangalore, IIT Delhi, they also gave the helpline number, because there was so much of mental distress. Even the children were in distress, women were in distress, unemployed people were in distress. And these helplines were not only on gender issues, even stranded migrants who say that the truck driver has run away, left us in the deep forest of Madhya Pradesh, and they were contacted. So the workers were from Jharkhand, they were stranded in this thing, and they started from Maharashtra. So contacting politicians from all the 3 states to see to it that at least they get water, they get this. And the one thing which they used very sparingly was their smartphone, because the moment if it stops working, where will they recharge it when they are traveling? No. So those instructions were also that only when you have emergency, use your smartphone, because otherwise you may not get facility to charge your mobile. Another thing was that what kind of sign languages and symbols that we have created, because those who are survivor of violence, they are in the proximity of the abuser, because they can't run away under lockdown. So those kind of, if you get certain hesitant response, how to respond, but that also we taught the volunteers. We also gave like general the understanding of toxic patriarchy and how to counter it, and also the pornographic songs and this, which were circulated very widely during the lockdown to young girls especially. So how to take the police help, that we said. Some of the important information about the Indian Penal Code with regards to various forms of violence against women and what can we do. So that is this thing. When the migrant crisis took place, whole discourse was about only male migrant. Even 2011 census, which says that we have 3 crore women migrating, either in the manufacturing sector or inter-district migration or in the agriculture migration, working as domestic workers. There was nothing which the policymakers were not even focusing on the woes of women migrants. And that's why this kind of images which civilians had taken, we started using in our training program. And we said that please attend to especially the reproductive health needs of women, because by then, within 3 months of lockdown, reproductive health issues had become exacerbated. The reproductive tract infection among girls, because there was not enough water, there were no sanitary pads available. So sanitary pads to be classified as an essential service and to be distributed free of charge in rural, urban and tribal India. That was the demand women's groups made. And second one was that reproductive health needs of women must be declared as an essential service, and a dedicated helpline for women, pregnant women, women in labor and the neonatal care that we need to provide. So that was the demand made by women's groups. The distress call services, the counseling services were also started, and this is how the interventions were made. Another very important challenge we faced was that of digital, as you said, what to do about those girls who are forced out of this thing. So wherever the NGOs and community organization, community leaders, religious leaders, they were ready. The online, like so many NGOs started distributing smartphones. So for a 5 student, 1 smartphone, and the custody of that was with the local leader. And in the bastis, wherever they were, the classes were started in a batch of 10. If it was a room was 20 by 20, then the 10 students would be allowed, 9 students with all the safety measures which you had to take of use of sanitizer and mask and all that. And that's so, but still education is a major challenge currently, because we need to use multimedia. We should use FM radio, we should use television channel. My generation benefited so much from countrywide classroom, which used to have, we had only one black and white Doordarshan channel in the 70s. And 12 to 4, every day there used to be countrywide classroom, and so many people have benefited in. So I think we need to bring all those medium for those technologies also. I don't think they are redundant technology. They are as effective as they were that time.
Thanks, Dr. Patel, for giving a very gendered kind of lens to the discussion, and also kind of sharing some of the initiatives at the intersection of how technology was used in an enabling factor, especially in terms of reducing the violence or at least mitigating gendered violence. Moving a bit away from that, and obviously basing and drawing from all the 3 conversations so far, I'd now like to move to Rushil. You are working at a very interesting intersection of where you are looking at a technology platform, Bandhu, to kind of bridge I would say, both the information asymmetry and the accessibility asymmetry that's there between a worker trying to find a blue collar job or even like a semi-skilled job, and getting kind of an agency to do that honorably, whereby the entire idea of distress migration probably could be reduced. And as Johnson and both Aniket also kind of drew that concept out, that it moves into something called an aspirational migration, where it's safe and it's honorable. So drawing from your experience, the Bandhu platform, and also where you're currently kind of situated, if you could share some of your insights on the entire journey, and also how do you see this getting contextualized within the larger public policy landscape?
Thanks, Arindam. Yeah, so of course, a lot of resonance with what Aniket said earlier, and Professor Gurji. So we came to this from the perspective that what is really fueling urbanization. I mean, of course, you have the economic theories, but effectively it is people, as you say, aspirational or distress driven. And what we found was, in order to have access to that intergenerational mobility that comes with access to the urban economy, a necessary condition is access to a stable job and affordable housing that is well connected. So, conventionally in, let's say, real estate economics, what you'd call the bid rent curve, you had to see what is it that is able to save and send back home. So a lot of our efforts, of course, started as students at MIT, and a lot of quantitative stuff. I'll probably share some slides of what really got us excited.
Please.
So, one interesting thing we kind of came to was that, migration can't be treated as some kind of a linear process. It's a sine curve, it's a cyclical process. And of course, there are varieties and segments of migrants, some of them who don't want a permanent house, some of whom who probably want that because only then they can gradually move up in the city and get access to a better network. And all of them, of course, had very, very unique needs. And that is something that only could be understood with larger data. So just to kind of illustrate, that's this kind of scale we are looking at. So take the case of a young boy who works on a farm for 9 months, perhaps a family farm, and takes one agricultural off season to work in a city. Perhaps when he's married, the family takes care of the farm. He can spend even more time earning that urban wage. And of course, this time split keeps evolving, but only when this single male migrant can rent the entire room in the city all by himself, instead of paying 500 per head, now he has to pay 2,500 by himself, is when he can bring the family to the city. Kids can get access to better schooling, better healthcare. So this is where it really starts to kick off. And, very interesting studies we had from Mumbai that if you actually start looking at what a property offers, most of them don't have toilets, particularly on the upper floors. They have to go to these PPP kind of model wala toilets. And you realize you're going to pay 30% more on your monthly rent. You start to add all that, including buying water and all. On a per square foot basis, informal housing is far more expensive than formal housing in the same location. So just some visualizations, in Mumbai, of course, it follows along train lines. but you start to see where Dharavi and Nalasopara are compared to conventional real estate pricing, and it's pretty much right there. Even in terms of getting probability of getting a job, you find there's barely a 30% probability, and recently it's fallen as low to 12 to 15%. And also these small time employers, contractors have a similar problem in getting access to, qualified skilled workers within a time frame. So though we realize there's this entire ecosystem, everyone is making blind bets, including the middlemen or contractors who kind of are the linchpins of this entire system and, capture a very disproportionate amount. But at the same time, so this is not something that's unique to us. Almost every platform in the country that's trying to do this found that. So we also found that a lot of the people who are pretending to be employers or rather pretending to be very large companies, I won't take names, they're effectively brokers who take care of a lot of other things. So this is where what we did was, start to include them into our platform, effectively connect everyone, including the middlemen, whose immense social capital we started to leverage. So, for a worker, just to kind of reiterate on what Aniket was saying, yes, it's very easy to build technology, but how do you get it to the last mile? How do you get it to the worker? So, of course, going with very, very visual ways, trying to find very, very simple ways in which, how do they understand? You give someone a date on a calendar, they won't show up. You tell them tomorrow, day after, what is the time frame that they're comfortable with in terms of planning? How do they understand geography? Do they understand geography through a map, or do they understand geography through the name of a place? Or, saying that there is this name and this is where my family or relative is. Including how do you get transparency to the employer about, does this guy really know the work he's talking about? So how do you make that very, very tangible? So of course, the ideal state of the platform is, workers say, these are the skills I have, this is where I want to work. Based on that, these are the cities where I can go to. Suppose in Mumbai, okay, this geography, we've got two ways, of course, map-based thing and a more name-based thing. And for every location, you say, okay, if this is my job, these are kind of housing locations which are already optimized for transport costs, time, and things like that. And you kind of know how much you can send back home. And of course, this is backed by a lot of our research, which said, for people who are migrating within 700 kilometers of their village, they made the highest gains. Almost the curve is 4 times steeper than people who come from much further away. And this is the kind of data intelligence trying to get to workers in a very, very simple way. So some of our experiments on ground. So of course, getting to workers who are already in cities. Also, going where they like to collect, labor squares. A lot of them, of course, don't have smartphones. So we have an IVR. And a biggest issue we found here was using the term OTP, because they've been told repeatedly by their banks, OTP kisi se share mat karna. So how do you actually get, to verify that the person holds that mobile number, the number is verified, create an automated system. So breaching trust, is like one big issue, or rather breaching that barrier is a big issue for us. Also, when you kind of bundle it up with entitlement kind of programs, it becomes much easier. You start giving them stuff like masks, which police was finding people or troubling people for. It made it very easy. Another big challenge we found was a lot of people who lost wages started to move out of better rental housing. Hello?
Yeah, Rushil.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so we found a lot of people who moved out from better rental housing to places which didn't have electricity. They had to charge their phones, and the local pan shop charged 10 rupees for charging it with electricity. So imagine, someone who's barely kind of making 1,000, 1,500 a month is paying 300, 400 a month to keep his mobile phone alive. So of course, even if you get them onto a digital platform, you realize you got the job for them. They're no longer there to pick up that call and say, okay, I'll come. So, those are kinds of things. So yeah, and including when you go to their communities, they can only meet you like after 10 in the night because they're trying to, look for jobs or do 2 shifts. And then, of course, there's absolute darkness even in trying to organize people together. Another interesting thing we found here, the people who are wanting to adopt technology on the employer side, very often they were backed by FIIs, they had very strong corporate governance, and they would say, hum to bank account mein paisa denge. Now, a migrant worker who's already here doesn't have a bank account. We said, okay, we can get you an e-PAN card and a bank account, but for that, the easiest way is an Aadhaar e-KYC. Now, when he applied for Aadhaar, usne neighbor ka phone number laga diya because he didn't have a phone. So now if he has to change the mobile number linked to his Aadhaar, he has to go back to his native place to get that changed. So all these kinds of things about, okay, if you want to access the big employers, there are these bottlenecks. If you want to access the middleman kind of employers, there's a bunch of other things that happen. You realize, why are you there in the first place if you want to perpetuate similar kind of exploitative methods? Of course, we are trying to realign incentives, but it does remain a challenge. So of course, we found a lot of community leaders who kind of operate like, mobile cyber cafes, help like 100 people in the community access our services through their phone, they get something in return. Again, early days, we've just been on ground since July last year. But of course, we've seen a lot of, stuff happening across the country, some fantastic organizations in rural areas that we've been able to partner with. A lot of data intelligence picks up. So just to give you an idea of the kind of data you understand in terms of, skilled, unskilled workers, where are wages higher, where are people more clustered, that tells you, okay, what are the kind of rents people might be willing to pay, how much might they be willing to commute, because the kind of interface we start building for our housing product, and the kind of housing that they perhaps start getting access to. So yeah, effectively, this is where we are, and it's of course a lot of challenges. One thing we've done is multiple people can register from the same smartphone. Again, as was pointed out earlier, gender is a big issue usually, and also the age group is a big issue. So we typically, when we are having champions or leaders who organize 5 other people with them, usually such a person is 18 or 20, between 18 and 25, who's literate enough, has access to a smartphone. But authority is coming from the person who's 40, right? And the person who's 40 perhaps doesn't have access or an understanding that the 18 or 20-year-old has. So how does that social, complexity play out in terms of who gets access to the smartphone, who makes a decision through the smartphone, but who's actually pulling the strings? So of course, a lot of such challenges, not all of them that have been solved. And I mean, I think I'll stop here. And again, we are kind of in very early stages, but yeah, sharing everything that Aniket and all of others are talking about. We have all the AI and all of that in our team, like, our team members are all MIT techies, but how do you actually get to the ground?
Thanks, Rushil. I think this was fascinating to also see that, on similar lines, again, the larger objective being drawing on Aniket's line, that it's about the means to an end and not the end by itself. So I think what we need is probably a very large concerted effort of such similar like-minded, enterprises, organizations, or even academic institutes to constantly produce, new evidence, new processes, new structures. I mean, at one go, it might not be possible across the country, but at least, across few states, because what kind of troubles me is that even after a year of the lockdown getting announced last year, a lot of aspects, especially in terms of, you look at the migrant worker thing, a lot of states and workers have gone back. I mean, including Johnson, who works closely there. I mean, we also support the CM's office. No matter, in spite of all your good intentions, when you mitigated the crisis, the fact that the middlemen are going to be there, there are issues that are going to be there around data privacy, about OTPs, about other linkages, breaches of data, and all of that. But how do we kind of pilot or probably build on such solutions and keep demonstrating some kind of, I would say, robust evidence from the field? Because that will probably force, governments at multiple levels to take things up or adapt. Because COVID definitely showed one thing, that even a big pandemic or a big crisis is a good opportunity that probably no one expects. So I think we have had a fantastic kind of an exchange of insights, applications, and also insights from work in the last 1 year. There are around 3 questions that have come from the audience, and all 3 are, I mean, sound pretty interesting. So I leave it up to all 4 of you. You can just volunteer to take up one of those questions. So for the question 1 is, any interesting impact of IoT devices in reducing challenges of interaction among people during COVID-19? So Aniket, Rushil, if you'd like to respond to that. Or even Johnson or Professor Patel.
So
yeah, please, Aniket, go ahead.
I think IoT devices mostly that we've seen effective ones, that, and also where innovation and money is going in, is in payments. So AEPS, Aadhaar payment systems, and a lot of other systems which are getting enabled. I think that's where, at least on the ground from our work, that we have seen that most of the because I think IoT is still some way to go to the kind of communities we are working, but I think payments is the piece where I'm seeing a lot of innovation, a lot of effective ways being used. I think a lot of things, innovation is also happening around communication and how to reach citizens, whether it is using merging, sophisticated local language IVR tools and link them back to even chatbots, and using it simply on smartphones and feature phones. I think a lot of work and apps are now also being built for feature phones. I think these are few of the things that are happening. I wouldn't really say it's 100% IoT yet, but I
Right.
think we need to kind of break it down and see that, what parts of it are being used with COVID and some more innovation. But I think a lot of it also we need to see that where is the money coming in. All of this
Right.
innovation requires money, and it is very difficult in this space to kind of attract that kind of money to do innovation.
Yeah. I think, yeah, I mean, and again, IoT, I would not say a futuristic concept, but in the way the digital infra and the digital kind of, inequalities are positioned in the country, it still seems to be a distant dream in terms of, leveraging blockchain and IoT and all of that for social welfare services. For the next question, I think either Johnson or even Rushil, I mean, you could also kind of take it up. Are there any threats to the technical interactions happening during COVID-19 in the society? So I think probably the audience member, whoever has posited the question, loosely is probably trying to refer to, surveillance or, the data privacy, the lack of the structures, or probably, things around that. So
even
yeah.
the complaint of Arogya Setu, so many innocent people
Yeah.
have been brutalized by police, no? Because
Right.
the trackers they have this. So.
Yeah, I mean, Professor, if you want to give share an insight, or probably Rushil, Johnson, any of you, please.
Yeah, can I come
Yeah,
in?
please, Johnson.
Yeah. So one of the the data privacy that we were talking about, that experience again during the management during lockdown period has been like when we were releasing this Sayata application for DBT. So one of the challenges that we were having, like people who are sitting inside the city are also trying to claim. They were trying to hijack that kind of stuff, showing that they are in Bangalore or some other places. But there was a geotag. But still, I feel that the access to smartphones, access to digital platforms, especially talking from the most poorest and vulnerable, because pandemic situation where we were dealing with, I mean, you are low esteem and you are really very sense of extreme fear coming out, and the people who were in the different parts of the country located housed in a house with more than 10 people, 15 people, they cannot move out, and all of them have button phones, and it becomes very difficult. So maybe more demystification needs to be done. And also the data security, managing large data is also an issue. And the Aadhaar, you cannot store it in the system, in the cloud system and all. That's also one of the challenges. Some of the policies need to really think through it. So Aadhaar, how much, because Supreme Court says that you cannot store data, but if you don't store, how do you really execute the policies or the social security safety nets that through cash transfer and all you are going to do it? So there are counter questions. So that needs to be really looked into. Those were some of the challenges I feel that needs to be addressed. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, Rushil, anything you would like to add?
Yeah. So I think one, how people understand technology and the kind of tools, like exactly what Johnson was saying. I saw everyone was making Excel sheets with the entire Aadhaar numbers. But if you want to automate that, you can't store the Aadhaar number. So things like that, and also number of data points that so many various organizations were taking. There were so many non-profits who were doing work on ground, and now there is all that data. And if you start to triangulate that, it can, like, as you know, during demonetization, the kinds of things that were happening, just take anyone's Aadhaar Xerox copy, and if you have access to their account number, you're effectively able to impersonate. So that in the endless ways, in which I don't want to give too many ideas here, but endless ways when you have so many data points. And I mean, simple thing like Bluetooth, stuff when you have Bluetooth on, like Arogya Setu, honestly, it's ineffective if you keep your Bluetooth off, because you can always keep it off before you enter the airport. You turn it on and you can say, well, I'm safe. But if someone is having it on all the time, it exposes you to all the other kinds of things. So again, I mean, it's endless, but there is gap between intention and what is actually the most efficient solution.
So if I just may add on the data privacy thing, right? Like, two things. One is that consent is very important, right? That's what the data privacy policy says. And I think our benchmarks or standards for different people are different. All of us probably share more data on our regular lives with different Google, Facebook, everything, giants of, I mean, this thing. And 90% of the people don't even know that. Mostly people who are, I think, first time users of technology who are, I mean, we are using that, but our benchmarks for people who we are deciding things for is very different, right? So I think our mindset on data privacy has to be that there needs to be more self-regulation of companies using data more effectively. I think there needs to be more control there needs to be checks and balances. There needs to be consent from the citizen. There needs to be, just like we have done these massive drives in the last 20 years with RBI on financial inclusion, there needs to be drives on data privacy, knowledge transfer, and what is right, what is wrong. But let the individual decide. I think I genuinely believe when you sign up for Google, there is an accept terms there. And I don't think anybody reads that. But I always find in data privacy conversations that our benchmark for people who are underprivileged compared to who are privileged is very different. And I think we need to bring that conversation to a standardized form and then see that where we need to bridge the gap in communication and information and bridging that gap and making them realize what is right, what is not wrong. I mean, what is wrong and right. But I think it is very difficult otherwise. And like Johnson also mentioned earlier, that how do you get entitlements if you don't store data? The systems, you cannot do any kind of service without data. I mean, if you're ordering food without your location data, how will you order food? Right? It is all, it's very, very basic and simple. But yes, I think consent is important, and we need to do a lot of work on kind of training people. There is a time right now, I genuinely feel, and more technology is coming in where people need to be given more information, communication, training on what is data privacy, what are the positives and negatives of every technology. No technology is good or bad, every technology.
No, thanks, Aniket. I think we have exceeded time, 12:52. So Arushi, if you allow like just a minute, probably to wrap up.
Yeah, perfect, Arindam. Yes.
Yeah. So I think there was also one last question. So maybe Professor Patel would like to just respond to that. It's very briefly. It's whether rapid digitalization in India due to COVID has been fueling women equality, and I would also add whether inequality also.
Yeah, I think it is both, because the women under the emergency situation, they have also developed resilience, because so many young girls we saw had never seen this level of volunteering for community work and emergency management. Focus on care work being taken very seriously, recognition of care work, reduction of care work, redistribution of care work. Those who are working from home, demanding from their male members, the fathers or father-in-laws of sons, to do the sharing of housework. That has become major this thing. Many middle class and upper class women have started using, families have started using Robo and Alexa for housework, because that for past 1 year there is no domestic help. So that is there. Webinar culture has also democratizing influence, because earlier what information, discourses and analysis were accessible only to the elite, articulate, intellectual elite. Now they are accessible. I can see in a remotest place like a Dhule or some interior college in some forest, you see participation on a Zoom platform of 700 and 800 people when you talk of Constitution of India and gender equality or gender-based violence. So I think that has also given that there is a new world outside where we are, in a small little place. And also social solidarity, the work which the young women have done for social solidarity in the midst of this crisis, that has also made them more aspiring towards Constitution. That whatever is taught to them under Article 14, 15 and 16 in every school and every college, we have to bridge the gap between the reality and the promises of a Constitution of India. Yes, it has made us move in the direction of equality. I feel optimistic. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Patel. And I think it's a very positive note to probably wrap the session, that there is this huge world that that students, young citizens, and especially the youth across the country, other than the metro cities or the Tier 1 cities, which is there for everyone to explore, engage, and also kind of absorb themselves in. And to wrap the panel, I think I'll thank once again all of you for sparing time on a Saturday afternoon and sharing some of the work, the insights and nuances. And thanks to Arushi and to ISB for kind of facilitating this. And on a parting note, I do feel very strongly as an as a partner of the organization, as someone working very closely with the Chief Minister's Office of a particular state, that it's very like-minded organizations like all of us, with some a lot of guidance from someone as senior as Professor Patel, there should be concerted efforts of all this kind of enterprises and these actions on ground that are probably not speaking with each other but probably to each other, to come together and probably demonstrate some case box solutions or approaches to say maybe 2 governments or 3 state governments. So some kind of resonance and public policy discourse starts happening where there is a concerted and collaborative effort that is shaping up. So I definitely look forward to Arushi, ISB probably taking the lead in terms of pioneering such kind of maybe a working group or an action group drawn from some of these panels together in the next 1 year, so that if we ever reconvene next year in the same conference, that we probably have something to show or demonstrate as a takeaway from this panel. So thanks so much, all of you. And Arushi, if you have anything.
Thank you so much, Arindam. Of course, the synergies between the government, the private sector, the academia, the developmental sector, all of it has to somehow get together. As you just said, and probably somebody will have to take that lead role in getting everyone together to work collaboratively on these very imperative aspects. So wonderful panel discussion. We just had very invigorating discussions, technology and society, and the kind of transformation that has happened in the COVID era. You people have actually brought it to the forefront. There was a wonderful engagement from the audience and a lot of questions also that we got. Thank you so much, Arindam, for putting this together. We have been working collaboratively, and we do hope to work collaboratively. So Bharati Institute of Public Policy would always be willing to work on aspects on, various policy issues, and would like to, would truly like to take this forward in the going times.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Aniket, Johnson, Rushil, and Professor Patel for being here. And thanks, Arindam, for putting this up.
Thanks to all of you. Yeah. Have a good day.